guys, welcome back to another episode of the Mind Muscle Connection podcast. Today is a special episode. So instead of a guest episode, I am uploading a recording I did on another podcast that I was a guest on. In this episode, I was a guest on 100% Real with Ruby. And so the episode was Why the Bulk Cut Cycle Fails Women, the Truth About Building. And so in this episode, we talk about some things like, for example, we talk about how building muscle requires a training stimulus, how many women make the mistake of not eating enough to build muscle, and how we want to focus on performance metrics versus just scale weight, how training to failure, how important that is, how nutrition plays a critical role in optimizing training performance, and your mindset around it, and how we can optimize our metabolism for better fat loss phases, and much more around muscle building, body composition. So make sure you check this episode out. Make sure you give Ruby's podcast a follow as well, 100% Real with Ruby, and hope you enjoy this episode, and I will talk to you guys soon.
Hello, and welcome to 100% Real with Ruby. Today, I have Jeff Hain on, and we are both extremely passionate about building physiques through building muscle, because that's the only way to do it. And that is only really done through training. You can't diet on muscle. You can't clean eat on muscle. You can't even surplus on muscle without the training stimulus there. And one of the biggest mistakes that I see many women make, which I'm going to get Jeff to go into the biggest mistakes that he sees as well, but it's this bulk and cut thing, which is just glorified yo-yo dieting, but also they don't push their calories enough to see the changes they want. They play safe in maintenance or just a little bit more, and they fluctuate between a little bit more and then they bring it back a little bit. And if you're going to do that and then want to shred for every summer, what exactly are you expecting to build in that period of time? So Jeff, welcome. And I know that this is one of your absolute passions. So what do you see as the biggest mistakes that women in particular make when it comes to wanting to build the physique that they want?
Yeah, you hit on it, right? Like, it's the biggest mistake I would say is, like you said there, where it's like you actually never give it time and you don't actually you don't eat enough, right? And I think the big thing there, it all comes back to, I feel like scale weight is what people overly focus on when it comes to all this. And so to me, starting out, like, the big thing is just not actually eating enough for any extended period of time. And when I say eating enough, I think a lot of people automatically think that that's going to lead to you need to be in this large surplus, you need to gain a ton of weight. And that's not the case, right? It's more so just, let's make sure we fuel enough that's going to drive performance, put your body in a good spot to where doesn't feel like you're not in this deficit, whatever it may be, but we're fueling enough, and we're fueling for training. We're fueling to put your body in the best position to optimize your metabolism. And again, that's not going to be done by trying to maintain your absolute lowest scale weight there. So I would say big thing starting out is not eating enough. And again, I'm not saying overeating, but not eating enough. And where I see people make a mistake there in that particular situation is they hear, okay, I don't need to be in a huge surplus, so then I can just maintain my weight. And anytime their scale weight comes up at all, then they're like, oh crap, I need to go backwards. And anytime we go from a state where we're eating fewer calories to now we're going to increase, again, maybe closer to our maintenance, you're eating more carbohydrates, maybe a little bit more food, and obviously you'll be eating more food in general, you're going to see your scale weight come up a little bit, right? So I think that's where people end up getting themselves caught up long term, is they don't want to see their scale weight come up at all. And that's what leads to them chronically underfueling and not really putting their body in the best position possible. And it's key to understand what's going on in that process, right? Anytime you increase carbohydrates, you're going to retain a little bit more water. Anytime you have more sodium, your water weight's going to increase a bit potentially, right? And then you just have more food in your system at any one time, you're going to see your scale weight come up a little bit. So my biggest thing here is you got to get over that awkward kind of weight stabilization period. Otherwise, you're going to get yourself in this kind of chronic low maintenance where maybe your maintenance is like adapted down to that amount. It's not adapted too far down, but you have this like artificially low maintenance calories at that point.
Yeah, the artificially low maintenance calories is one thing that I see quite a lot, because people, especially women, feel like as soon as they eat over 1,600 calories, oh my God, as soon as I eat over 1,600 calories, I gain weight, I gain this. It's like we're focusing on the wrong metrics. And you mentioned there as well, being tied to the scale. I feel like it's a huge part of many women are tied to the feelings that they had during underfueling. So as soon as their body starts to feel a little bit more fuller or hydrated, it's like all the warning signs go off. And you did also mention there, which I feel like is a great path to go down. Women in particular have, especially when you're in your 30s, your 40s, etc., we haven't really learned how to train for the physique that we want, because all the messaging back then that was pummeled at us was this like fast-paced stuff, not resting all that much. Women have to train differently than men, when in reality we train the same way. The only real difference is that men like going bro on chest and bro on arms more often. The only real
Yeah.
difference is that women like doing legs more. So it's like maybe we don't need as much chest, but outside of all of that, we train the same. And we still need to push ourselves closer to failure. And unless you can learn how to train close to failure, then you're not really going to see the changes that you want. And I usually tell people to train to form failure, because most women underestimate what they're capable of anyway. So I want to go down that path, because if we can learn how to actually push ourselves in the gym, then we'll actually start to see the changes that we want. But it's really hard to feel like you're progressing in the physique that you want if you're still focused on all of the wrong things, all of the wrong metrics that were probably the right metrics to use when weight loss was the goal. But we want fat loss, not weight loss. And we want body recomposition, not just looking smaller and feeling smaller. Because if you stay tied to that, what exactly are you expecting to see? That's why you've been stuck your whole life.
Yeah. So you want me to talk a little bit about the training side of things and that? Yeah.
And focusing on the right things for the physique that you want.
Yep. And I think I actually heard this from Luke Lehman. I know you're obviously super familiar with him. He did mention like, hey, when it comes to muscle growth, stuff like that, like women, generally speaking, right, probably need to do less cardio, which I still think women should do some cardio, right, for the health benefits, et cetera. But generally speaking, they should lift heavier, right? Whereas men should probably do a little bit more cardio and a little less just heavy lifting, right? So that's a kind of good kind of rule of thumb there, right? And again, we don't mean heavy, okay, you need to rip out your 1 rep max all the time, right? It's like, okay, 5 to 10 rep range, 6 to 10 rep range, and heavy for that rep range there. And you mentioned this too. I don't think you necessarily, let's say you don't always go to failure. I think that's fine. Obviously, we know from hypertrophy research that the closer you get to failure, it's going to be better for muscle growth. It's just going to be one of those things where if the further away you get from failure, I don't think you're not going to see any results. It's just going to be a lot slower. And I think you said this already earlier. It's like muscle growth is already a freaking slow ass process, right? So you're almost just making it even slower than is necessary by staying further from failure. So we can almost be more efficient by getting closer to failure. But I also think that's a skill that does take some time to dial in. I don't feel bad if you don't get there right away, but I think the big thing being that, hey, over time, we're progressing in that 6 to 10 rep range. And again, maybe that doesn't happen every single time you go in, but over time. And then over time, you also can get better at pushing closer to failure, because it is a skill, just like everything that we do is a skill. That is a skill in itself. And when you can do that, everything just becomes more efficient there. So yeah, I mean, that is a big thing with women when it comes to hypertrophy is, yeah, it's probably not lifting heavy enough for that rep range. And then they end up lifting 10 to 15 plus reps. And there, again, there's nothing wrong with that rep range either. It's just a lot harder to get closer to failure. You're just spending more time training. So that's why I fall in that 6 to 10 rep range. But I think if you can find exercises that feel good there, you can progress. And again, over time, you continue to learn how to get closer to failure and you're progressing over time. That's a huge piece of this as well, too, right? Like I initially hit on the calories and the nutrition side of things. But as you said already, in order to build muscle, you need to train, right? You need that training stimulus. And that is a big thing where people will argue about, hey, eating enough, surplus, not surplus, but then they overlook this part of it. It is super important that you are pushing your training over time. And I feel like with hypertrophy training, yes, you need to lift heavier, but to me, the most challenging part of hypertrophy training, getting close to failure, is one, like pushing through that discomfort, right? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like pushing through that discomfort while maintaining your focus on what you're doing. To me, that's the most challenging thing of hypertrophy training, is that aspect of it, right? It's because I think a lot of people hear lifting heavier, so then they just automatically just put a ton of weight on, and then their technique is just garbage. And that's not going to get you any closer, right? Because we want to make sure that the target muscle is close to task failure. It's got to be the muscle, right? And you're not going to do that by just loading up weight, having crappy technique, and not placing tension on the target muscle. So to me, that's where that challenge comes in. And I know you know that feeling, right? Where it's, you're like six, 7 reps in and you're like, damn, I still got to get 3 more. And it's like still staying focused, still pushing through. Like that to me is the challenging part of hypertrophy training.
Yeah. And I would also add on to that. I put this on my stories yesterday as well, because I have been stuck on 110 kilos or 230 pounds on my RDLs for the same 8 reps for weeks and weeks. And it is so easy. Many women can fall into this trap of always feeling like if something isn't moving up, then it's not progressing, like there's something broken with it. But in reality, that is exactly what is there. It's there for you to challenge yourself, maybe an extra rep wherever you can, even though I've been stuck on the same reps for that. That is you forcing your body to change. And this is why just because you're progressing on the logbook doesn't mean you're building muscle. I think a lot of people fall into that trap where they're always seeing progress on the logbook, but that doesn't correlate with muscle growth if your training program changes every 4 weeks. Of course, you're going to keep progressing because you have new movements all the time. So you're going to keep progressing on that. You need to be okay with pushing that for long enough, which is why having the same metrics or the same focus on fast change, immediate gratification that you used to get in fat loss or you used to get in challenges doesn't work here anymore. This is where you need to find joy in, oh, this feels so good. Oh my God, it feels so good to push myself an extra rep, to just grind out that extra thing, because that's where the reward comes. And if you keep trying to chase the physique you want the same way that you have your whole life where you've been struggling, you're not going to get a different outcome from that. And you also did mention that you started off on the calorie side, and I feel like that has a lot to do with it as well, because if you're not fueling enough to recover, to train harder, because I know that it can feel like you can give your best when you're not fueling your sessions, but over time, once you start to get used to fueling your sessions a little bit more, you actually start to perform a whole lot better. And even if it's not just performing a whole lot better, you can last with the same high quality for a longer period of time and not just for the first few exercises. Because yeah, okay, cool, you might have enough energy for the first few exercises, but if that hasn't been well fueled, then even though in the research it says that you don't really run out of all that much glycogen / stored carbs in your muscles as you do bodybuilding training or strength training, you actually do run out of a lot of that. It's just that it's not really seen in the system in the way that they test it. But when you go into the actual muscle cells, it is depleted from the type 2 muscle fibers. It's just that type 2 muscle fibers are tiny, so that you can't really tell, but it's depleted from the muscle. So of course they go into fatigue, they're going to fail earlier. So of course you're training hard, you're training heavy, but there is so much more capacity in you if you had more carbs in your system. And it's not just, this will be a good one for you actually. It's not just what you have before you train, because you're not really going to have that in the muscle cells available. It's what you've felt 24 hours before that, the week before that. It's fueling yourself through the day, through the week. And this is why most women will not build muscle in a deficit. Maintenance is enough to see the progress that you want. And then if you're not happy with, that's when you can push your calories a little bit higher, but learn to train while eating in maintenance. And this part will tie into that, so you can go off this. I'm a big believer that if you put in the effort and deal with discomfort for long enough just to do it right the first time, for example, 2 years of just building and eating more and eating enough to get to a place where, okay, you have all of this muscle mass now, you can do like a diet phase, and then you can start to just lean build in maintenance, and you'll actually start to look the part because you put in that discomfort for 2 years before. You're not going to have to keep dieting over again and falling into this glorified yo-yo of bulk cut, and still not happy.
Yeah, no. So yeah, you're 100% right. A big thing that I see is a lot of people end up like in this perpetual kind of cutting and always just feeling like they need to lose a little bit more weight. And it comes back to what we initially said of, one, they half-ass their fat loss phases, and then they don't do anything during the time outside of fat loss. So then you always feel like you're having to lose body fat, right? And I think that can be that's a tough place to be, right? Because you're never really going to change your body, and you're going to feel super frustrated. You're going to feel like you're always fat loss dieting. And so I feel like if you can get better at that part of it, you're going to be able to get in and get out a little bit more. And then that leaves us more time to be able to fuel ourselves enough. My goal with clients is eventually get them to the point to where they don't really need to diet more than, I say, 3 to 6 months, but honestly, we're talking 3 months out of the year. That's where I want to get people. And that comes down to, one, having both feet, not 1 foot in, 1 foot out, both feet in your fat loss phase, get off where you need to get to where you need to get from that perspective. And then from there, let's find a good amount of calories that's going to do all the things that you talked about, fuel your training to where you can push it. Again, maybe it's a little bit of focus on nutrition around your workouts. For a lot of people, it's also like dialing in things outside of the gym, right? Like managing their overall stress load on their body, getting good sleep, dialing in their circadian rhythm. Another big thing is a lot of times when people are outside of fat loss dieting, they don't really pay attention too much to the food quality, right? So, oh, hey, I have more calories to work with. Boom, I can eat whatever I want. We still want to have a good focus on making sure that you're not missing out on any important vitamins, minerals, right? Like you're getting a good base there. But then also too, like looking at somebody's like gut health too, right? And that's another big thing where I feel like if that's not in check and you're just hammering more food on, you do want to get that in place too. So it's dialing in the fat loss phase, but then outside of it, like making sure that all the variables are in place, I think is going to be a good spot. And I believe that if you can get more of those things you can get dialed in, the less people need to like really push their scale weight up, which really is ultimately why a lot of people don't, especially women, don't want to do these phases, is because they think that their weight's going to be super high. And again, I think this comes back to the whole bulking thing where we need to take your body composition into play here. That's going to be super important. If you're someone who's gotten leaner, but maybe you're not as lean as you want to be, to me, it doesn't make any sense to now make you gain a ton of weight. This is where we can really focus on your inputs, and that's going to put you in a good spot to where, we're going to maximize your metabolism at wherever that is. We're going to train better, like we talked about, set up your training to where you can really push that. And yeah, maybe you're not going to maintain your lowest weight. You may see your scale weight trend up over time, but you're going to be in a much better position to where now you have more muscle, you've optimized your metabolism, you're in a better spot overall health wise. Now, when you go back to a fat loss phase, it's going to be way more efficient, and you're going to, again, feel like you can get in and out in less than 3 to 6 months. And then you repeat the process there. And I feel like you build on these over time as well too, right? Like you learn what works best for you. You find what kind of weight range feels best for you. You continue to learn how to, like we talked about, training to failure is a skill. You continue to learn how to do that, which in turn could help you during your fat loss phase, right? So I could keep going on and on here, but that's the lay of the land there with that.
I liked that last part you said, actually, where you said you'd learn how to train better, and that's going to help you so much more in your fat loss phase. And I think that part is really overlooked in 90% of, actually, I'll say 98% of the cases, because once you learn how to train that much better, once you get that much stronger, once you have that much capacity in the gym, your fat loss phases are going to be actual fat loss phases, not just scale going down phases, because you're training hard. You're going to maintain that much more muscle. You probably will be able to build a little bit more at the start of it while you still have the fuel there. Then as you get deeper into the deficit, obviously you won't be building. You'll be just fighting to maintain it, but you have that much more capacity to have even more. Yeah, okay, you don't use training to burn calories, but it still burns calories, and you'll be burning a lot more through your training because you're doing that much more effort through lifting heavier weights, through being able to be capable of doing a lot more volume within that section, because now you're doing, let's just say 200 for 8 reps instead of 100 for 8 reps. And that was in pounds. So 150. It's like that much more volume, and that's going to stimulate a lot more muscle, and that's going to keep the muscle. And then you said the whole bulking thing. And I think that's probably the biggest thing. We try to cling on to our leanness. And I know that was one huge thing for me as well. As now I'm known as this, and this is how people see me. And if I let go of this, oh my God, the world's going to crash down. It's like catastrophic. And I said that wrong, but it's like we make this huge, we catastrophize it. And bulking gives it a bad rap. It's almost like, I don't want to get big like that person or like that person. They probably don't actually know how to do it. They're probably eating a little bit too much. They're not actually building, they're bulking, which is why I like to differentiate the words bulking and building. You're not bulking, you're building muscle, you're building stamina, you're building strength, you're doing things outside of that. But I feel like unless people are in a fat loss phase, they feel like they're not making any progress. Everything's on hold and they're waiting for the next fat loss phase so they can, quote unquote, start making progress again. Where I see it the other way around. You make progress outside of a fat loss phase, and then a fat loss phase is a temporary trip away to just chip away to see what progress you have made. But this isn't something that you do every single year or twice a year to reveal, oh, I just want to see what I built in the last couple of months. You didn't build anything in the last couple of months. Try timesing that by 5 or by 7 or by 10. And now you have 20 months of actually building something to reveal. But I think that's a really good a really powerful thing as well. Like you're a good example. I'm a good example too. Like we find things inside of the gym that excite us that aren't fat loss. Like you love getting stronger. You love seeing if you can challenge yourself. These are things to get excited about that will keep you building muscle. So what are some things that we can actually get excited about that will lead to the physique that we want?
Yeah, so things to focus on outside of fat loss. I like that because that's a super important, right? Because like you said, a lot of people just associate fat loss with the biggest, like that's the only way they can make progress, and we know that's not the case. So, what can we focus on in this phase to make sure that things are headed in the right direction? Like you said, you do need to take the focus off of just physique for that time, and some things that I think are important are we talked about it, but performance, right? What are some performance things that you want to focus on, right? So again, getting stronger, finding some thrill with that. Maybe there is like a sport that like a sport you want to play or some sort of performance event that you want to do and associate that with that. Now, that's one thing that we can focus on. But what I always like to do is focus on like how you feel during this time too, right? Because again, a lot of people that are maybe scared to go to this point outside of a fat loss phase or increase their calories or whatever, they're just so used to that feeling of just being not low energy availability, but I don't think that's necessarily like a poor, like they're low calories, but it's also very poor diet quality. And so you just feel like crap, right? Like you're not getting the micronutrients. You're also like undernourished because you're not fueling your body with all the vitamins and minerals you need in a deficit. So people kind of get used to that. And they also do a ton of training on top of that too, right? Where it's like they have this like low caloric intake, high output. That's just not going to be a recipe for best body composition and just like how you feel and performance, right? And so when we get out of that, when we start to increase our calories, I really like to focus on like how somebody feels in and out of the gym, okay? Like paying attention to that. If there's maybe haven't had their menstrual cycle for a while, look at those things. Look at how you feel in social situations, how you can feel better from that perspective. But also in this phase, underrated aspect of it is we can't hack our metabolism. We can't like increase it by say 1,000 calories because we're eating more calories, right? But what you can do is you can optimize your metabolism. And I feel, again, you're not going to do that when you're chronically just trying to maintain your lowest body weight. And so think of it as, hey, I'm optimizing it now to just put me in better metabolic health overall to add some lean body mass. And then again, that's going to make my future fat loss phase more effective. Like I said, when you can optimize your metabolism, whatever that looks like for you, when you can do that, again, fat loss, body comp change in general just becomes much easier. And so I always like to relate it to that. So we're looking at performance, we're looking at how you feel, for women, looking at your menstrual cycle. Did you get that back? Also looking at the flexibility that you're able to have and how you feel around food, right? I had a client, she came to me, high 120s, lean, was just telling me how like has a ton of food focus. She felt like she wasn't able to maintain her weight. And really, to me, it just came down to she was just in this artificially low caloric state because she was trying to maintain a level of leanness and she wasn't focused on how she felt. And so I feel like by having her see her scale weight come up a little bit, but also focusing on body comp in this process, right? This is where big picture, like our inputs, the things that we're doing are going to be the biggest thing that's going to drive body composition change, not just looking at scale weight, right? And by putting her metabolism in a better spot, by giving her a little bit more calories to work with, the anxiety around food, I feel like goes down. So paying attention to that. If you're someone that's like on edge around food or scared to eat anything, I feel like this phase can be really good for that. As long as we still have some structure, right? That's the big thing is having some structure there.
I actually think that this is a really good phase for most women to just fuck the scale off for quite a while. Because if you've only ever focused on the scale, you're going to still get triggered by it, regardless of what story you want to tell yourself, because you've only ever seen it in one way. Give it at least 6 months without the scale. And if you can't do that, then I would question your relationship with the scale. I would really question your relationship with the scale if you cannot step away from it from 6 months. Because if you need that as validation of you doing the right thing, or you're not, or you fear that you're going to let yourself go because, oh my God, I don't have the scale to keep me in check anymore, then that is something to ponder. You need to learn how to feel in your body, what makes you feel good. And the scale isn't going to tell you that. And if you're going to rely on the scale all of the freaking time, what do you expect of yourself? What are you expecting to get out of this? And the other thing...
Sorry, real quick on that, just to play devil's advocate on that. I agree. I think it could be a good skill to get away from it. I'm huge on data. And for me, I'm coming at it from this angle. Whereas I feel like almost like for some people, I almost think like weighing yourself during this time can be a positive thing from a mental standpoint, right? Because I think it's a bigger issue if there's something deeper going on if the scale like causes all these like anxiety and stuff like that, right? So to me, it comes down to like almost leaning into that discomfort a bit, but learning how to interpret the data that you get from that and having that education around it, I think can be super, super helpful. Now, if somebody, again, maybe for certain of your clients, stuff like that, like you guys have found that to be the best route to go. But I just feel like getting that data can be super helpful because it really gives you an idea of, okay, if you are overly concerned about body comp, which people are concerned about, it's like it's a good idea to keep tabs on it. But I think the education around it is where people maybe miss the mark on that. So just to play devil's advocate on that there, I think again that could work in certain situations. But again, I also want to come at it from that angle of I think it could be beneficial for people to track their weight during this time, just to again lean into that discomfort a little bit. But in saying that, we never want to cross the boundaries. Okay, now this is, hey, mentally, this is just not good for you. Maybe we do need to take a step back as well too. So
yeah, I feel like it can be the greatest bottleneck for so many women in their 30s, 40s, and 50s because the only thing that they remember the scale as is it needs to go down, otherwise you're a failure. Which is why, to me, it's like at least 6 months away from it, so you can learn to focus on other metrics. Then, if you're okay with bringing it back in, bring it back in again and start to use it as that sort of data. Like I have just only pulled out my scale again because my coach wants me to try to track my body weight going up now that he wants me to start pushing into a slight surplus. And I think this is also where a lot of people go wrong, which is why I want to start doing a segment with my coach on how we're going to approach this. You can lose a lot of fat in a short period of time. Like you should see substantial changes within an 8 to 12 week period of fat loss if you set it up right. But 8 to 12 weeks of building muscle, like good luck. You're not meant to be tracking the scale. Yeah, you're not meant to be tracking the scale going up to the same degree that the scale would be going down if you were in a fat loss phase. That shit takes time. For example, gaining for a woman, let's just say half a pound in a month, that is like huge in itself if you can even gain half a pound of muscle in that period of time, especially if you're still learning how to do like this, pushing yourself to failure, fueling yourself enough. Like that is crazy. But you can easily lose like 3, 4, 5, 6 pounds fat in a month, depending on where you're starting. That is how slow this process is. So if you're going to keep slashing your calories every single time that you feel uncomfortable, or you think that every summer is the greatest time to do a shred, then what are you expecting to build? And then, yeah, you mentioned to make fat loss phases easier. Luke freaked me the hell out when he pushed my calories up from 1600 all the way up to 2600 through eating a lot of carbs, because to me, I was exactly as you mentioned your client. I was food focused. I was wanting to train all the time. I was throwing in finishes. I was throwing in an extra 6th day of HIIT because I didn't feel like 5 days was enough. If I didn't annihilate myself enough, I'd added more sets, drop sets. Like I was insane before Luke. And I knew all of this stuff. But just because it doesn't mean you can apply it to yourself all the time, because it is that discomfort. And it's the discomfort that was so uncomfortable to sit with of not much changing, because that's the hard part of building muscle. But what is probably the most important part, maybe you can speak about your experiences too, is that because I was so food focused, how the freaking hell would I expect to do and lose the fat that I had that I was so uncomfortable with, feeling puffy and all that kind of crap, if I was going to keep sabotaging myself anyway, and if I was already eating 1600 calories, and if I was already low energy and hardly, and like slugging myself through extra cardio, like how would I expect to see the body composition changes that I want? Let alone the fact I wasn't really getting stronger. I was just doing a shit ton of work in the gym. And yeah, maybe I got stronger here and there, but it was just a repetitive cycle of throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks. This is where structure really comes in, and it's why having a coach is so beneficial, because you have a direction forward in a way that you're training specifically for physique, and no one is taught how to train for physique. Apps don't train you. PDFs you download don't teach you. It's just, here's a new program. Go off on your will. It's not like actually progressing you over the lifespan of you lifting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it sounds like you were just kind of in that spot where like you were low calorie and just spinning your wheels, and increasing calories for you was just like a foreign kind of concept, basically.
I was training my ass off and on 160 grams of carbs. And the first thing he said to me is, we're getting your carbs up to 300. I'm like, bullshit, I'm getting up to 300. How about 200? He's like, 250. 200, 250. We kept having that argument. And then I did 250. I freaked out over the scale, et cetera, et cetera. And then he compared my photos 6 months in and he's, look at that. You've tightened up in the midsection because when you're low energy, when you're training your butt off and you're not fueling yourself with enough carbs, of course your body's going to hold a lot of water. Like you're stressed the hell out. Your body is
Yeah.
stressed. And as soon as you actually give your muscles what they need, of course you're going to hold more water from the carbs, but it actually goes in the right places.
Yeah. No, again, that's a common thing, right? I feel like a lot of people get in that spot where they try to ramp up the training output on low calories. And it's like, that's not what we're trying to do, right? It's like you're doing all this work, but like you said there, your body just is super stressed and you're not going to see that change that you want. So it's like, that's a tough spot to get in. And again, that's not going to put you in a good spot to build muscle. And you're going to be putting all this time into training. And that's where people end up kind of spinning their wheels, right? I think they use weight training or training in general is the way, like we know we can use that as a caloric funnel to help with body fat, but if that's like the main focus, man, it's going to be hard to do that. And if you do want to do it that way, and this is how Luke teaches it, is like you need to ramp up your caloric intake to match that too, right? If you want exercise to be like your main caloric funnel, it's like you're going to have to increase your caloric intake to get there, right? Now, you still obviously want to be in a deficit, but you can't be eating 1,500 calories while also doing 5 cardio sessions and super high training volume. It's like that's just going to be the recipe for disaster. But that's where most people go when they try to lose body fat. And big picture here too, because I wanted to bring this up because you talked about this earlier. I think all of this, so a couple things. One, I think body comp is super important in all of this, right? In terms of like building muscle at maintenance, building muscle in a deficit, whatever it may be, right? Your current body composition is super important, and that's going to help figure out like what we can do in the energy balance that we're in. And I think this is where most people get themselves in trouble is people are black and white, like, hey, you can't build muscle in a deficit, whatever it may be. And again, in general, anytime you're in a energy deficit, you're seeing your weight trend down, like that is not going to be the most optimal for building muscle, right? That's always going to be suboptimal compared to say being at maintenance or a small surplus. But I feel like the way people go with their training and how they approach fat loss, they're never going to be able to build any muscle in a deficit because of how they go, right? Whereas if we can start to get these inputs down, you could, again, are you going to maximize muscle growth in a deficit? No, but you're still going to be able to build a little bit of muscle in a deficit. And I really think that's going to add up in your fat loss phases in terms of how you look as you diet down. So really what I'm just trying to say there is that approach that you were talking about, low calorie, high training output, that's not going to build muscle in a deficit, right? You're not, just too many things there, too much stress on the body. Your body's, the last thing it wants to do is add muscle in that process. But I think if we structure things right, you can build a little bit in a deficit. But as I said, body composition is the overriding thing here, where the leaner you are, right? Somebody like you, Ruby, like leaner you are, it's going to be really hard to build any muscle in a deficit. And obviously as that deficit gets larger and larger, aka you're losing weight quicker, it's basically going to be non-existent, especially the leaner you are. And I just feel like with all this, body composition is just overlooked when people talk about weight loss, weight gain, in terms of what's going to happen in that process.
And that's why I'm going into a slight surplus too, because I'm not even in a position with how advanced I am in my training to be able to build muscle at maintenance, really. If I want to actually get I want to grow my glutes. I want to grow a little bit more in my delts and my legs. And it's hard for me to do that if I'm going to be sitting at maintenance, because you need fuel, and muscle is also made out of stuff. So the more stuff that you give it, the more it has to build from, because your body wants to actually function as well. So it needs the body fat there. And I feel like so many women feel like they're meant to be like wooden skeletons. No, your body has fat. You're a human. Things jiggle. Muscle even jiggles when it's not flexed. Like, you're not made out of wood is the TLDR of that. And I feel like
I'll finish what you finish.
I love the part that you did mention on the deficit, because so many women aren't already training to their full capacity. So as soon as you start to train properly, you can start to build muscle because you're pretty much like a newbie again. But as soon as you start to get to that level of, yes, I'm pushing myself really hard, this is where it becomes a matter of, let's sit at maintenance for a long period of time, give yourself the fuel you need, push yourself as much as you can. And then we'll see where we are at in 2 years' time if you want to stay playing safe. Or you can get a little bit more uncomfortable and play on the high end of maintenance, because if you still have body fat to lose, like you said, I do not believe in putting people into a surplus if they still have body fat that they want to lose, or if they're in a place where they look like they need to lose some body fat. You don't need to go into a surplus. And I think there's so much mixed messaging on social media that makes people feel like unless they're eating this enormous amount of food, they're not, oh, that's what I wanted to talk about because you mentioned that before. Unless they're eating this enormous amount of food, they're not going to build muscle. And you mentioned this. I feel like the reason many women struggle to allow themselves to eat more food is because every single time they've tried before, or every single time that they've done a quote unquote bulk or building phase before, they've done it the wrong way. They just thought that training more or training harder or heavier without actual like logical progression at all, or just eating more protein, eating more food is going to lead to muscle growth. That's why you haven't seen changes, because nutrition needs to match training, needs to match let's actually progress you the right way versus let's just throw a shitload of food or a shitload of training at it and see what sticks.
Yeah, I think people get super sloppy in the phrases outside of fat loss, right? Everything goes out the window, and it's like, all right, you still need to make sure you have a good base of quality food, good diet quality. Again, the training side of things is super important. And so, yeah, if you're sloppy with it, you're sloppy with your meal timing, you're sloppy with food choices in general. Yeah, I mean that you're going to struggle, and you're not gonna see the change you want. And this is why I'm just a huge proponent of, let's look at, before we focus on getting into a surplus or whatever it may be, we need to look at your inputs. That needs to be the most important thing. Just to rewind it a little bit, there's a couple things that you said that I want to go over. In a deficit too, when we talk about building muscle, when I say inputs, you're also going to put yourself in a better position if you're also managing your overall stress load on your body, if you're getting high quality sleep, if you're have a balanced diet that's not lacking any micronutrients, right? If you're getting enough protein, like that's going to put you in a better position to see that. And if you're just training and then all those other things, that's going to lower your ability to be able to add muscle in deficit. So that's why I think the way people go about it is super important. For you, you talk about, hey, you're going in a surplus. I think for you, you'd be a perfect person to go in a surplus, right? Like you're on the leaner side. You already have a good amount of muscle. You want to continue to build more. And so like for you, it just makes sense of, you're not going to, like you said, you're not going to see a ton of change just at maintenance. Like you're somebody that needs to, like you said, get a little uncomfortable and probably push it a bit more now. And I think that's the other key piece too is, yes, body composition, right? We talked about your body composition, but also where do you want to go with all this too? If you're someone that really wants to grow your glutes like you do, and you want to have bigger glutes, and with where you're at, you're going to have to push probably a calorie surplus now. Again, we still want it to be controlled, right? We probably don't want you to gain too much weight. I would probably do it for you where it's like, hey, you're going to be in a surplus for a little while. Let's get you to a weight range where you feel good. Now we can keep, maybe then you go closer to maintenance or something like that. That's another way that I've been approaching building phases, is doing something like that. But people don't want to they don't want to build as much muscle as maybe you do, right? Or they don't realize that they don't need to build as much muscle as you. So they don't need to necessarily push their scale weight up a ton in that process, right? Because I think a lot of times people often get confused with, oh, hey, to maximize muscle growth, you need to be in a surplus. And they're looking at like professional bodybuilders. And a lot of people don't want that. So I think that also gives people a little bit more wiggle room to first dial in their inputs, see where that gets them, and then you can push that surplus. Now, if you're someone who's super lean and you're super underweight, okay, hey, you're going to have to gain weight to build muscle. I know we're talking women in particular here, but for guys, if you're 130 pounds and you want to be super jacked, all right, you're probably going to have to gain some weight, right? You're not going to be able to get there doing that. So just a few extra things I wanted to hit on there.
No, there are two things that you just mentioned that were really good. You said if you're on the leaner side already, you don't actually see yourself as leaner already. And I think that's the hugest part. Like that's why I don't judge myself, because I'm so used to seeing myself. So I don't know am I too lean to do this? Am I too lean to do that? Because I don't see myself the way that others would. So that's why I let my coach call the shots, because for me, I realize now that I've been trying to get my glutes to grow bigger and bigger in maintenance, and it has not been happening. And I push my shit to failure, and it's too slow in maintenance, and I want my glutes to grow. And I feel like as well, when you mentioned that women don't have to push their scale weight too high, this is exactly where it comes to. You need someone as an outside source to know where you're starting at first, because the muscle that you say you want is going to take a long time to grow. So yeah, you might not need to push it all that much higher, but you do need to give it way more time to build, because muscle isn't bulky. Muscle is really lean. If you're not gaining a surplus amount of fat, you're going to need a lot more muscle than you think you do, especially if you're over the age of 35. Because if you're not trying to build muscle, you're losing muscle, because you're going to be losing muscle just by the natural aging process. So you need to be doing everything you can to at least gain muscle, to at least build muscle. And that's why even playing with the deficit can be really hard once you're over 35, because everything needs to be a lot more dialed in and you're clinging to it for your life. And if your life is already chaotic, you mentioned this, which I think is important for you to bring back in again. If you've got all these other stresses going on, and if there's so much going on, it's going to be really damn hard for you to keep the muscle that you want to keep in a deficit if your sleep is shit. So it's like you need to get all that in check before you enter a fat loss phase so that you're at least keeping muscle, if not building a little bit at the start as you go through. And you did mention one other thing that I wanted to bring up as you do this. You said training in the 6 to 10 rep range right at the very start, because I feel like this goes into what you wanted to say about training. But that, I feel, Luke promotes this as well. It's most women don't know how to train in the 6 to 10 rep range with a weight that actually is a 6 to 10 rep weight. So learning how to push yourself to failure within the 10 to 15 rep range for a while and pushing yourself allows you to get into a place where you can get more out of less work, out of less reps, and make that 6 to 10 rep range really effective. Because I hardly ever do 15 plus reps. I hardly ever do 12 plus reps unless it's like some accessory thing. But most of my work is between 5 to 10 rep range, 5 to 10 reps. And you get effective AF stimulus in that rep range as it is, because it doesn't take you like 10 reps to start getting into the effective rep range of you pushing close to failure. You're pushing close to failure halfway through your set.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I agree. That's why I love that rep range. It's like you're close to it already, and if you can learn, like you said, it's super effective. And I also think in that, let's say closer to 5 to 8 rep range, you also can leave a rep or two in the tank, and you're going to be getting a lot out of that rep range too, right? So it also is very forgiving from that standpoint. But you do need to learn how to do it, and that's the tricky part, right? Because again, it's that fine line of lifting heavy enough, but again, doing those things that I talked about where you push somewhat close to failure, but also staying focused with good technique. But yeah, no, I definitely think there's something to like also lifting a little bit lighter, but pushing failure from there and then learning how to really push failure. And then you can get more out of that 6 to 10 rep range. I think that because again, like you said, then it's okay, there's no magic in the rep range. It just ultimately comes down to, can you actually push yourself to failure there? And like we said, that's a skill, and it's going to be hard to do that with heavier loads right off the bat. So I agree with that. I know you stopped me earlier on I talked about gaining and then maintaining once you gain a little bit of weight. I don't know if there was anything you wanted me to hit on with that, or if you had any other specific questions.
No, because that's where I'm like, that's exactly what I love doing too as an approach, because just because you want to build muscle and go into a surplus doesn't mean that you stay in a surplus forever. It's like you go into a little surplus and then you pull back into maintenance, and then you can go into another little surplus again. But the whole point is to just get you into a place where you're gaining a little bit, but then once you're at a place where, okay, we're actually at a really good place right now, let's just push the training. You're fueled up. Let's stay here, park here with your calories, and just keep slamming your training. And by slamming your training, I don't mean adding more and more. Let's get you progressing. Let's get you getting some numbers on the book. And once again, if you're advanced, you're going to be fighting with the same weight for quite a while, but you're actually in a place to be building a lot more muscle tissue with that weight. You don't just force progress, because like you mentioned with the technique getting sloppy, that's not actually progress. You're trying to just train at your very best close to failure. And then as a result, your numbers are going to go up. Your reps are going to go up. I really did want to actually touch on something more concrete, as in what does your training look like right now as well? Because I think many people feel like to build and to look a certain way, you have to do all of these different exercises. You have big full days, but I think you're like me in the fact that we don't have a shit ton of volume, because you have a kid as well. It's like we don't have a shit ton of volume in our program. It's what you do with that.
Yeah. I'm going to hit on my training. I just want to reiterate the fact that what you brought up, and this is, again, comes back to what I've said the entire time about the importance of body composition and where that's at. And again, when we talk body composition, fat mass, muscle mass, and again, I think people too often focus just on the energy balance, and we need to look at our body composition as another factor of that. Like that's again, the more fat mass we have, that's energy on our body. So that we need to look at that. And so I have found that approach to be helpful, and I've done this in mine, and I'm sure you've done it in yours, where yes, you push it up for a little bit and then you feel good. You find that weight range that you feel good. You're still progressing. You're not seeing your weight trend down, but it's staying in this range, and we're not actively trying to push up. I know for me in the past, I thought surplus meant I had to be in that the entire time, and all that did was lead to extra fat gain that I didn't necessarily need. So now it's okay. Hey, I end a fat loss phase at 155. This is pounds. I'm not over 300 pounds, or I'm not 150 kg. And I get to say I slowly build up to say between 160, 165. Once I hit that high end of 165, Now maybe I'm going to slow that down a little bit and hang out there because I feel good. I'm able to progress training from a gut perspective. I feel good. Whereas in the past, I would just keep pushing it and like gut health would take a hit. I would feel crappy and then I would just need to cut a lot sooner. Right. And so it's like that to me, that one, you're in a great spot to build off your current body comp and you're not in a deficit and you can push out that building phase longer, which I feel like we also have talked about this throughout. I think the longer we can stay out of a deficit, once you get to a certain point, the better your body composition is going to be long term. And so that's where we can tie all this in with that. So I do want to answer the training question because I love to chat about my training. But was there anything else that you wanted to hit on with what I just said there?
No, I gave that chef's kiss to what you said. That's why
Cool.
it's important to do this the right way, because if you push it too uncomfortably, or if you haven't learned how to sit with discomfort, you're never going to see the physique that you want. You're training.
Yeah, training. This has evolved a little bit. It's still the same, but like for me, in the last probably 2 years, one of the main things that I really wanted to focus on more was I was like almost anti-cardio in a way. And I never, especially in building phases, it got to the point to where one, I was pushing my weight up the entire time. And then I also would like try to keep steps low. I would try to I wouldn't do any cardio, right? I was like, oh, this is going to hurt my gains. And this is just a aspect my entire life that I've really neglected. And now I've really come to love cardiovascular training and incorporating a little bit more of that, right? For so many reasons. One, for me, it's going to help me recover just day to day. It's going to help me recover in between sets. It's going to help me just handle life stressors overall. It's a little bit of a different feeling than doing weight training, right? I feel like hypertrophy training is somewhat of a grind of you need to keep pushing through, but I feel like cardio is really that grind. And I feel like from a mental standpoint, you don't get that from the weight training. So part of my training now is making sure that I'm improving my cardiovascular fitness. That's been a focus for me. And so I do 3 days of that. It's a combination of like lower intensity, longer duration stuff, right? Because this is where I think from a cardio standpoint, we're not doing it to burn calories. I'm doing it to improve cardiovascular fitness. And it's one longer session, I would say about 45-ish minutes. And again, the goal there is to get my heart rate up, but not let it go too far, right? Or get too high. Then I would have a medium intensity cardio session. This is like closer to 30 minutes where I'm pushing that pace a little bit more. And then I have my higher intensity cardio session where I'm really pushing like more interval styles. And this is anywhere from, my coach has me programmed anywhere from, I was doing 5 minutes, which your intensity is a little bit lower, trying to go as quick as you, like trying to push it for 5 minutes straight is challenging, right? Like that, it's hard in its own way. You could do it as little as 1 minute, but it's again more interval style. And I guess people would call that like HIIT training. And I enjoy that, right? Like I feel great after that, but that's the type of cardio that you don't want to necessarily do all the time. So that's what I'm doing from a cardiovascular standpoint. And then from a weight training standpoint, I'm doing 3 days a week with that. It's a lower, upper, full body split. So I'll do Monday, Tuesday, I'll do lower than upper, 2 days of cardio. And then I'll do on Friday, my full body. The full body has one quad, one hamstring, and then I hit every other muscle group there. And then my lower body on Monday is lower. I'm working out at home now, and so I'm a little bit limited on equipment right at this moment. And then my upper is, again, it's tricep. With triceps, we're doing one overhead. We're doing a push down. Chest, we're trying to hit like an angle, like a sternal angle where you're more of a flat press, trying to get like an incline press, and then sometimes like either a fly or a costal where you're pushing high to low. Back is upper back, lat, right? So it's just real balanced from that perspective. And everything is about 2 sets, but it's close to failure, mostly in the 6 to 10 rep range. And yeah, and I also told my coach Brian this phase, one thing I wanted to incorporate a little bit more of was a little bit of plyo / power based stuff. So now this phase I'm working on doing a little bit more of that, right? So there's some skips, there's like basically a jump from my knee and like into a broad jump. And again, my thought there is I've never really focused on any power based training. And as I talked to my coach about it, it was like, okay, I probably have a decent power just because I've lifted weights since I was 15 years old, but I never really focused on explosive type movement. So I'm just wanting to incorporate a little bit of that. I don't want it to take up too much space. Luckily with that, it's usually low volume. You don't have to do a lot. And since I haven't really directly trained it, I feel like I can get away with a good amount. So I'm just trying to be a little bit more balanced, but my main focus is I still love physique development. I still want to try to get as jacked as possible. So that's the training side of things. I don't know if you have any questions on that. I can dive into what my nutrition looks like yeah.
I want to quickly touch on the training part because what you mentioned at the very end, you're trying to get as jacked as possible and you don't look like a huge bro bodybuilder. And this is the part that and you're a guy. This is what women miss. You are not going to get jacked by accident. And it's just absolutely impossible. And I wanted to say you've been Luke fluent, as in for the cardio. You've been Luke fluent.
He honestly, with Luke, I was already kind of on the cardio train with him. He obviously made it even more. But for me, I think where I was more Luke fluenced was more on the power base side of things. That was like more so where I was probably Luke fluenced the most out of all of it, right? Where I'm like, okay, he talks a lot about this. I think that's super important. But plus, we know too that as you age, like that's the one characteristic, fitness characteristic that seems to decline the quickest. It's your power and yes, strength. You talk about muscle, like that's going to decline as well too. But it seems like that power is the one that if you don't do it, that's going to have this sharp kind of decline as you continue to age. And you know that that's super important to maintain for function and just general health as you age.
Yeah, I feel like the plyometrics plus strength training outdoes doing friggin' like the whole sprint interval stuff. It's like most people can't recover from that enough as it is. It's like just do your zone 2. You do not need to do sprint intervals. You do not need to do your HIIT stuff. Just train, get really fucking strong. You're going to get the benefits from type 2 muscle fibers from getting really fucking strong. And the power stuff comes in through like plyos and skips and that's kind of stuff that you lose. And I feel like that's a huge thing that the general population needs to know because you're not an athlete. Like Stacey Sims and her athlete research, you don't apply that to yourself, please. And then the fact that you mentioned 2 sets as well. Like for me, one thing that I was just like, this is such a great example because for me, if I think about all the leg training that I do in a week at the moment before my program becomes a lot more quad focused, because apparently I have 0 quad because of my femurs. Every single time I deadlift, RDL, Bulgarian split squat, anything that I do, my hips and my hamstrings and my hips and my hamstrings take over because femurs. And this is exactly where having a coach helps because you're not going to get better at squats by squatting. You're not going to get better at deadlifts by deadlifting. That's just keeping the skill there. You need to work on the weaknesses. But that aside,
Yeah.
I have squats and they're not going to build anything much. They're just there as skill because I only do 1 rep, 2 reps, and 3 reps of squats. And same with deadlifts. I only do 1 rep and 3 reps at the moment. That isn't there to build muscle. That's just there as a strength exercise. But everything else I do, I have leg press, 3 sets. Leg extensions, 1 set. Glute hypers, 3 sets. Romanian deadlifts, 2 sets. Bulgarian split squats, 3 sets. I think that's all the leg training that I actually do, to be honest. I think that's all. Yeah, that's all. And then my deadlifts and my squats. That is literally all the leg training that I do. And it's funny when you look at a typical person's program that it's just loaded with all of these different exercises. Like you don't need that much, but at the same time, if you're starting out, you do need more than Jeff and I because you haven't learned how to actually use the rep ranges and you can get away with more reps. But the goal is to get the most out of it, to learn how to make those reps efficient and effective. And then you don't need more. And that's a huge misconception with so many women. It's just like the more that I progress, I need to add more. If I take some away, I'm going to lose progress. That was a huge thing with me. And Luke, I was so bad on trying to cut back from 6 days to 5 days. So he gave me 6 months buffer of, nope, you're just going to do 5 days. And 6th day, you can go in and just do zone 2 cardio for 30 minutes. So that's where I started. And then he finally got me down to 4 days of training and 2 zone 2s. But that's the thing. And then I got rid of the zone 2s and only did 1 day of zone 2. Doing less actually got me more results because I learned how to actually train properly. He got me using the tempo stuff. Like, don't just rush through the movements, use the actual muscles. Like, it's not 10 seconds of an eccentric, it's control the movement. I just really wanted to talk on the fact that you don't need more stuff to get more results, but you do need to learn how to use your stuff effectively and put all of your focus there. I feel like I have this for you guys listening to this podcast because it's coming out this week. There is a podcast coming out that I did as a solo soon where I go on all of this already, where you are focusing on everything that isn't the right thing because it's so much easier to gain control of, which you might be able to talk about this as it comes to your nutrition when we go into that last part. But because it's so much easier to control something that gives us tangible results straight away, I'm going to cling on to my food, or I can control this, I can control the scale. But training is a really hard thing for that because it's delayed gratification. It's showing up all the time. It's putting in the effort. But that is what you need to focus on to build muscle. That is the only thing that builds muscle. You need to put all of the stress that you're putting on the scale weight, on the calories, should I eat brown bread, whatever. Yes. Get your nutrition to a sound place. That is so freaking important, like we've mentioned so many times. But past that point, everything else is just training. Take it away.
Yeah, no, training is super important. And if that's not there, I mean, you're missing the mark here on building muscle. And you bring up a good point. If you are someone that doesn't like training to failure, you can mask that by or make up for that by doing a little bit more volume. Again, I've taken that approach in the past, and trust me, I like this approach better of making things more efficient and a little less volume. But you can make up for that by doing a little bit more volume. So it really just depends on how you want to train. And that's the cool thing about it, right? It's like there's that inverse relationship between intensity and volume, right? The more intense things are, the less volume you can do. The more volume you can do, the less intense it has to be. And again, that applies to hypertrophy training for sure. But yeah, as far as my nutrition goes, so this again is something that I want to get my clients to at some point, right? I love the concept of tracking calories and macros. I think that's a great education piece and a great way to get you into it. And if you really want to see really good body comp change, I think it's necessary, especially at times. But my goal eventually is to get clients to be what I like to call like autopilot mode, right? Where you have the tools in place and you don't necessarily have to track every last calorie macro all the time. Now I'm going to give you some caveats to that, but that's how I treat my nutrition right now. And again, understand that this comes from somebody who has tracked their calories and macros for extended periods of time. I love learning about training, nutrition. So it's that kind of knowledge base is there, right? And I work with clients and I've done this all myself for a while, right? So it's going to take a little bit to get there, but ideally we get to this point where you can be autopilot. So what does that look like? So for me, it's all right. First thing I'm doing is I'm choosing how many meals I'm going to have per day, right? And what it's going to be. So for me, it's 4 meals per day. Okay. And I'm going to make sure at least 2 of those are somewhere around my workout. I'm not overly concerned about it being, oh, hey, 33 minutes before my workout and 25 and a half minutes after my workout, right? It's just like, hey, sometime around my workout, I want to get some sort of nutrition in. So then I have those 4 meals. And then from there, I break it down into 4 extended periods of time, like 1 meal or 2 meals will be the same, right? And then that way it's now I have this like structure. I'm working within these guardrails to where I don't have to track every last little bit. And then from there, I'm tracking my body weight just to see where the energy balance is, right? Making sure I'm in the right energy balance, right? If it's trending up too quickly, hey, I know that I am eating more calories than I think somewhere. And for me, really the big thing is I just don't want to see it trend down over multiple weeks, right? I'm trying to avoid being in a deficit. For me, that's the more important thing. I don't want to see these extremes up, but I also don't want to see things trend down because that's not going to be good for my current goal, which I'm in what I call a building phase, but it's kind of my new approach where it's like a maintenance/building phase, right? So that's how I set that up. And then from there, it comes down to, hey, I'm getting at least 20 to 30 grams of protein at each of those 4 meals, right? And then at least once a day, I'm getting fruit and veggie in at a minimum, right? And then from there, I'm just trying to, that's where I'm at from like what I call my autopilot. From there, I'm making sure I hit enough steps per day. I'm hitting my workouts and then just generally following good nutrition habits, right? I'm not having large meals late at night. I'm eating mostly foods that are going to fill me up, right? I'm making balanced meal choices. And all these things and I'm not getting to the point where I feel like overly stuffed at meals. And these things just help me to where you just can regulate your body weight better and you can manipulate it up or down based on that. So that's how I do my nutrition now at this point. And I haven't been in a deficit since October 2023, coming up on a year and a half here. And so it's been nice to not have to do that. I do want to get into a deficit here soon because I do think from an overall health perspective, there's some benefit to getting into a deficit at some point in time. But again, it's nice to not have to always diet. So that's what my nutrition looks like. And again, eventually I want to get people to that autopilot mode. And with that doesn't mean that you never track again. It's just, hey, maybe during certain periods of time, you can dial back a little bit in terms of tracking, right? But I do think if you're going through your first building phase, you're going through your first fat loss phase, whatever it may be, you do obviously need to track for some period of time to get that kind of awareness and education around it. But eventually we want to get you to that point.
I feel like tracking gets you to a place where you can create this autopilot mode, but I feel like many women, because they've spent so much of their lives in this deprived state, they have to make food like this massive event. And you sound like you don't give a shit about your food. It's just like it's there. It's just have a structure there. And that's the thing. Like I used to give way too many shits about my food. Now I don't really need to give it all that much thought anymore. I don't want to. I don't want to be food focused. I don't want to have to make this elaborate thing around my food like I used to. Because I don't need to. I've been well fueled. I have not been in a deficit since 2021.
Yeah, you got me beat way more.
I love being in maintenance. I feel like if unless you actually put on substantial amounts of body fat, you don't need to do a deficit because
Yep.
as long as you're at a healthy body fat percentage, you're doing enough of the cardio or walking steps to keep your health there, to keep your cardio health there. You're training for muscle. You don't, that's the thing, get yourself to a place where you never need to diet again, unless you really want to push a surplus again. But otherwise, it's the best place to be. It's just that you really need to go through the discomfort at first.
The thing is, I'm not anti-deficit. I'm not anti-surplus. It's just, again, it's all dependent on where you're currently at and your current body composition and just getting away from that, increasing your output while not having the right amount of food there. That's where we want to be careful. And so that's my main thing. And I guess another good takeaway would be like building muscle is a slow process. And this is why I'm a huge proponent of trying to get everything dialed in that you can, because if not, you're going to feel like you're spinning your wheels outside of a fat loss phase. Because like you said, let's be honest, you're going to see the most change in the short term by doing fat loss, right? That's where you're going to see the most change. But unfortunately, you can't be there forever either. And your body, I guess there is a subset of the population that can just keep pushing through, but there's also a subset where you try to stay there too long, your body's just going to say no, and you're going to eventually not be in a deficit. And then it's an uncontrolled surplus, and that's what we want to avoid at that point.
I just wanted to tie a bow by saying that part that you said, you can't be there forever. Trying to stay in a fat loss phase for a long period of time when it isn't serving you anymore is actually going to make your results worse. So it's like you'll get the results at first, but you're just going to look worse and worse over time. Body decomposition, the longer that you keep yourself in a fat loss phase. That it's just like most people have got themselves into a decomposition phase because they're staying hardly eating enough to actually fuel their training. They fuel how to train, and they're not eating in that big of a deficit for long enough to actually see fat loss. So you're just exactly as you said, spinning your wheels.
And then you're not going to damage your metabolism, but it's going to adapt to that. And then now we're talking, hey, you're going to run into some gut issues, you're going to run into some thyroid issues. Then that's going to lead to a whole host of issues. So it's not only are you going backwards from a body composition standpoint, but even an overall health standpoint, you're going to be going backwards as well too. And we know with women too, that women are at a higher risk of autoimmune issues. And I feel like that perfect storm of all those things that we just talked about is going to lead to more of those issues as well too. It's super important that this is why I'm such a huge fan of, hey, we need to spend time fueling enough. Not necessarily in a surplus, but enough to really maximize your overall health and physique or metabolism, optimize your metabolism and just, overall health.
That last statement right there is exactly why I got Jeff on the podcast, because everything that he just said in that last little bit, we are a huge fan of you fueling enough. And I feel like it is such a fear out there. I really hope that you guys took a lot from this podcast, because like Jeff puts this on his Instagram a lot as well. So I highly recommend that you read his stuff over and over again as well. So it reiterates the same points that you probably heard from me a million times over. But the less that you can remove the fear away from the scale fluctuating or feeling a little bit fuller or fluffier or more hydrated, the closer you are to seeing the body composition changes that you want, because now you're not just tired to feeling deprived and dehydrated and decarb. There's another one, and decarbed over time as well, because carbs are carbohydrates and there's going to inevitably be a hydrated feeling with carbs. So that like eat enough for long enough to see the changes that you want, but learn how to train, because eating enough for long enough isn't going to get you the results if you haven't learned how to train to build the tissue that you want as well. With that, is there anything else that you want to leave my audience with? Leave your Instagram handle here as well, just in case people don't actually check the show notes because they're on the go.
Yeah. I guess one last thing would be, you talked about feeling puffy, etc. I find that a lot of the time that feeling puffy is just too much stress on the body, right? Somewhere along the lines, too much stress on the body, whether that be psychological stress, perceived stress, some sort of stressor on the body in terms of what you're doing, too much training, not enough recovery, whatever it may be. That's part of the issue at play too, is just a lot of just stress on the body. So I've found with a lot of clients that end up feeling that like puffy feeling, really working on, okay, to me, body composition change is all about giving the client the right stressors at the right time, but then also knowing what stressors to pull away from the body as well too. So it's always that give and take there. And I find that if you're feeling that way, it's more so that than anything. So again, just something that I wanted to say there that I've been like super passionate about is just like stress on the body, nervous system, stuff like that's just super interesting to me. But yeah, as far as where to find me, podcast, Mind Muscle Connection podcast, and then Instagram, Jeff_. That's where I'm the most active. So if you have any questions on this podcast or anything, just reach out to me there. And again, really appreciate you having me. I love taking time to chat with you and talk about this. It's super fun and interesting. So
I love this topic. I'm so glad we actually got a riff for longer than I realized, because this is a passion topic. And on that stress part, this is the thing. take this away with you. It's how that stress makes you feel, because then you try to grab control of something and everything feels uncomfortable. It's not just the stress on your body, it's the stress that it then impacts the mental aspect of it all. So with that,
Yeah.
thank you for listening to this podcast. It would mean the world to me if you could give me another 5-star rating. They've been tracking upwards and I've been getting a lot more eyes on this podcast. So I thank you all for tuning in and sharing it with your friends. And if there's anything else, shoot either one of us a message and you will hear me on the next podcast.